We're going to go ahead and record this webinar. So if you need to view it later for reference, it will be posted on CJC's YouTube channel. Please feel free to share it with your colleagues if they weren't able to make it today. My name is Rima Atung, and I am the program coordinator for the Illegal Marijuana Market Enforcement Grant. So it's a pleasure to meet you all if I haven't met you already. We're going to go ahead and get started. If at any point anything goes wrong with the audio or the slides, please let me know. You can also ask questions at any point. Myself and Shelby, who's assisting me with the recording today, we'll be watching the chat. We'll be watching for your raised hands. So feel free to jump in at any point. So let's get started. So our agenda for today is posted here. We're going to be talking about why we're revising the reports, some reporting deadlines, the different forms that are included in the quarterly reports, a new annual report, and then we'll be gathering your feedback and questions. We're going to do a quick walkthrough of the different reports in each section, which includes the incident reporting form and expense sheet, some quick information on amendment requests, an introduction to a reporting cheat sheet that we'll talk about later, and then annual narrative questions. I know this is a lot to cover and we'll be moving quickly. Like I said, please ask questions at any time, and then there'll also be an opportunity for your questions and feedback at the end of the presentation. So let's get into it. Why revise the reports? Firstly, CJC is in the process of standardizing some of our processes, one of which is our expenditure reports. And what we're doing is rolling out standard expenditure reports across all programs. Since we are implementing this new form that will be its own Excel form, we thought this would be a good opportunity to review the other tabs on your current program and expenditure report and try and make it a little bit easier and a little bit cleaner for you all to submit information. So the new report is kind of broken up a little bit differently, but the information is essentially the same as what you're reporting now. We made a series of changes to make it clearer and easier, hopefully. They will be submitted separately from this new Excel reporting form, and we're going to talk about all these components. So it sounds like a lot, but hopefully it'll become more clear when we go through it. Also, we wanted to increase and improve the information available about the work that you guys are doing. It's important work, and the marijuana cases especially, we find, are a little bit difficult for legislators and others to conceptualize and understand. They're kind of complex cases that touch on a lot of different aspects, from environment to, victims of human trafficking to drug trafficking organizations. So we're always looking for ways to capture that information more fully so we can tell the full story of what you're doing. We also implemented some new data quality measures on our side in our review process that we came up with looking at what has been submitted so far in those Excel files that you folks currently submit and what kind of answers we were getting from those files. In a lot of cases, we were getting consistent answers that you folks were typing in manually, and we're trying to make those into multiple choice or drop-down menu options instead to make it easier for you to report. We also wanted to revise and refine certain questions where we weren't quite getting the answers that we'd hoped for, and we removed and adjusted the timeline for some of the questions that are in that Excel reporting form now that are open narrative questions. So we'll talk about that as well. As always, we're just trying to make this process easy for you folks. And I'll say it again and again through this presentation. This is meant to be a conversation. We're making these changes in hopes that we'll get better information and also make your lives easier. And we want to get feedback on whether or not we're achieving that. So please feel free to reach out to us at any time. So I wanted to briefly go over some of our reporting deadlines. The last quarterly report that you folks just submitted in January was for quarter 8 of the current grant cycle. So the quarters are a little bit confusing because we have such an extended grant period for this grant, but they're listed here. So the next one is going to be quarter 9, where you'll be reporting January to March 2024 data, and that will be due April 25th. And then we have the rest of the recording deadlines as well. And as you can see, there's a column here for annual report due. Those are only going to be due with the quarter 11 and quarter 15 reports. So once a year in October. So please just keep that in mind. And the reason we're doing that is because some of those narrative questions are really, really helpful when we do our legislatively mandated annual report for this grant program. So we wanted to make sure we were getting that information fresh right before we start putting that report together. So let's talk about the reports that will be due each quarter. The first one is what we are now calling the incident reporting form. And hopefully, as we go through this is going to look very familiar to you. Right now we have that Excel file where you guys fill out a column in the file for each incident. The way that it is formatted now, it will be one form for each incident, but all of the information for that incident will be included on the form, and it'll be real clear and easy what the information is associated with. So it's one form per incident, but the sections are essentially the same as what you're filling out now. So, page 1 on this new form will be about the incident and arrest. Page 2 will be about indictments and convictions. Page 3, agency resources. Page 4, victims and survivors encountered. Page 5, environmental impacts and civil code violations. And then page 6 will be the asset information associated with that incident. So that is a little bit different because now it's on a different tab. We're hoping to put it all together to just make it more streamlined to report. Please make sure that the form is filled out completely. You will get error messages for certain questions, and we'll talk about that more as we actually look at the form. And this will be submitted through SurveyMonkey Apply, which is where you upload your form to now. But essentially everything that's on the form is the same information that you're capturing now. The format is a little bit different, excuse me, but it's the same information. In addition to this webinar, we're also going to be putting together a cheat sheet that goes through step-by-step instructions, just in case anyone missed this webinar or if you have questions later on. And we'll be talking about that more later in this presentation as well. So let's get into the incident reporting form. Again, we changed questions where we saw you folks submitting similar answers. So we tried to make those yes or no questions or multiple choice rather than having you type it out manually every time. We also changed some questions so that how you answer it, like if there's a drop down where you have to answer yes or no, another follow-up question might pop up based on your response. I do want to note that the way that we're doing this incident reporting form, you will be able to access them later after they're submitted in case something changes. We've heard sometimes information isn't always available when you serve the warrants. So we wanted to make sure you could go back and add things like about the court case or whatever later on if needed. For these following pages or slides that we're going to go through, places where a response is required are indicated in red, and that means that to save the form and move forward, you would have to answer that question. In this page, the required questions are question 1, incident date, and question 2, controlling agency case number. Again, those are things that should be entered for every incident and should look real familiar to you at this point. We have added question 3, which asks about the number of individuals encountered on site. And this is to help us understand the circumstances of each incident, because some of the narratives that we heard indicated that when you go on scene, they can be very chaotic and how your response is depends a lot on the circumstances you walked into. So we're trying to numerically capture that a little bit better. So also on this incident reporting form, page 1, we have question 4, which talks about what criminal actions are taken against the folks that you encounter on scene. That's also new, again, based on just what people were typing into the Excel form. So we have some options there, whether someone was arrested, cited, ticket to appear, referred to a DA or other, and you can fill in the number. And then there's a space to enter, if there was an arrest or criminal action, what statute it was related to, and there's space to enter up to 10. If you run into any issues with not having enough or it being too much, please let us know. The next page, these are all required questions. And again, these are questions that are on the form now, but we just changed the format a little bit. So except for question 6, which we added, how was the incident identified? Which identifies whether it was a tip or, folks going around the neighborhood or how the incident was actually identified and investigated. We changed the wording on some of the questions, like did the law enforcement response involve a multi-agency response? Have you ever investigated or responded to a marijuana-related incident at this location before? That's the same as is on the form currently. And then we did add for question 10, upon further investigation after the date of the incident reported, did you discover this incident was linked to a drug trafficking organization? That was something that we saw in the data that we got, is sometimes, folks don't always know at that first time that a warrant is served whether or not it's linked to a DTO. So we wanted to capture that as well if we could. The second page on indictments and convictions is very similar to what you're doing now. We did add this question 11, which is required, which is how many cases are associated with this incident. Again, I think, we just want to be able to capture as complete a picture of what's going on for each incident as we can. There's also space to enter up to 10 court case numbers and up to 10 statutes related to those court cases. Question 14 and 15 have to do with whether or not the case resulted in a conviction, and if there were any cases related to the incident that were not filed. Those are new questions based on the information that we were getting. In a lot of cases, with the court case number, we would receive just kind of like a short description of what happened with the case. So we're trying to standardize that information and make it real quick for you to fill in. And then page 3, agency resources. We changed the wording a little bit, but these are questions that are from the Excel response, or excuse me, the cell reporting form currently. So just total number of individuals deployed to the incident response team, total number of agency staff deployed, and total number of grant-funded agency staff deployed. We did remove the percentage FTE pieces of those questions just because that seemed to be filled out a little bit inconsistently, and we can get that information from your budgets. So we didn't want you to have to do those calculations for each incident. If at any point you have any concerns or you don't feel like this information is accurately capturing your IMM EGP funded teams, please let us know, because we do want to capture that as accurately as possible. So the fourth page is, it corresponds to what your current report is for the victim survivors encountered on scene. Question 19 is required, and there is a space here. So if it says, did the incident involve any individuals you suspected or confirmed that were trafficked? So that's similar to what you have now. If you enter yes, it has you specify what type of trafficking, and then you have another place to enter other if that's not applicable. I just wanted to point out here that in some questions you'll get this optional other fields, so feel free to put whatever you need to in those fields. In question 21 and 22, we just tried to massage the language a little bit. It's the same information you're capturing now about what agency or community-based agencies you linked those individuals with and what other resources were provided. So we just tried to separate out what we're asking to be a little bit more clear. So question 21 is, number of individuals your agency provided resources to, including like go bags, brochures, victim service agency contact information, that type of thing. Whereas question 22, what we're really trying to get at is the number of suspected or observed victims on site that you referred to victim services in a more intensive way, like if there was a CBO actually on site during the warrant, or if you had a more personal, like warm handoff with the CBO for that person. So we separated out those two questions a little bit. So page 5 is the environmental, natural resources impacts, and civil code violation questions. And for those, we tried to make those multiple choice since we were just getting a lot of different responses. We went through, everything that was submitted and tried to come up with categories that people were consistently typing in so that you could just check the box instead of typing. So what we have here, you can see in this question 23, if you enter yes for the incident involving land or natural resource misuse or civil code violations, it comes up with this list that has types of misuse or violation. We have environmental, water, electric, building, civil code, other. That seem to capture the types of responses we were getting, but if there are any additional that you feel you're reporting consistently, please let us know and we can add them. And then the last page of the incident reporting form is where you'll report on the assets seized. So 25 and 26 on this form are mandatory. And those just ask, was your agency responsible for the asset forfeiture case? And then gives you a space to provide the agency name if you weren't responsible for it. And then question 26 asks about the case number. In a lot of cases, the case number appears to be the same as the controlling agency case number for the incident. So you won't have to re-enter that if that's the case. If it's different, then we ask you to enter that different case number. And then we changed the format of how you're reporting the assets seized just a little bit. Again, in the current forms, it's just kind of a free-for-all where you can enter, by each type of asset, whatever unit of measure and amounts or narrative associated with that folks feel like entering. We tried to make it a little bit easier and more standard. So for example, for marijuana plants, the asset number 1, you go to the first column or the second column, I guess, and use the drop down to select the unit of measure for that asset seized. The standard ones for these drug type categories are pounds, grams, pills, and other. Again, if there's other units of measure you commonly use, let us know. But locking it down like that will help to consolidate that information, and hopefully it'll make it a little bit easier so you're not typing that in again. And then the third column, you just enter the amount associated with that unit of measure. Similarly, there's a space for firearms and money where you can just enter. And then for other asset types, like vehicles, real property, water pumps, you can enter either the number or the estimated value or both. And then there's a space to actually enter any other items seized as well. At the very end of the form, on the asset seized page, we have this open-ended question that's just, do you have anything else to share about this incident? Feel free to include anything that you think is important to know about it. It's not mandatory, but we did want to have that space open in case there's something else that those standard questions aren't capturing. as I mentioned before, so that's the entire incident reporting form. So that will be filled out for each incident. Hopefully, as you go through it, it'll get pretty quick to fill out since there are so many more drop downs and check boxes. Marking it as complete will submit the form. However, you will be able to go back and open it and edit later if needed, especially around that court case information or the DTO question. So that's the incident reporting form. Are there any questions or comments yet? I'm not seeing or hearing anything, so I'll just go ahead and move forward. We might not even take up all the time. We just seem to be barreling on through, so hopefully that's a good thing. All right, so the next sheet is the expense sheet. Again, this is rolling out across all programs as the standard way to report expenses for every grant program. The expense sheet for marijuana includes 2 tabs on a single Excel form. The first tab is the grant expense tracking sheet where you will put information in. And the second tab is our CJC admin detail tab. So this is just a quick introduction to the form. We're just going to look at a visual of the first form. Again, more details will be included on that cheat sheet we're going to talk about soon. I do want to point out that this document is locked. The only unlocked space where you can enter information is going to be the column for that quarter where you're going to put your expenses for that quarter. You can't add anything to the form. You can't add anything to the admin detail tab, the second tab of the Excel sheet. We do want to make sure that you look at it and it's complete. And that will be uploaded as an attachment in SurveyMonkey Apply, similar to how you do the reporting now. So let's take a closer look at what that looks like. It's an Excel sheet. So this highlighted or circled column in red here is an example of what you're going to be filling in. Each quarter, you'll receive your updated expense tracking sheet from us. So we will prepare the sheet and send it to you, and all you're doing is filling in that specific column. You fill in your expenditures for the quarter, and it will have the categories and staff positions and everything pre-filled. Again, you will only be able to enter information into the column for expenditures for that quarter. It's locked, so if you have changes to the budget items, they need to be made through an adjustment request, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So adjustment requests, the process is the same as we have now. The form might change a little bit, the wording, we're still working that out, but just as it is now, if you need to make a budget adjustment, which is a change that's less than 10% of the award between categories or between line items, you submit that through SM Apply. We review it and we can make that change internally. The difference is that we will then update the quarterly expenditure report to reflect this change. If you have a change that's greater than that 10% award cutoff, then that is required to be reviewed by the commission, and we consider that to be a budget amendment. So that's a little bit more intensive of a process. You submit the request the same way, just the way that we process it is a little bit different. And again, we will make the change to the form ourselves once it's approved by the commission. If there's a change to the actual program or services, starting a new program or ending an existing program, then that again is a more intensive type of change and also requires review by the commission, and may require an actual amendment to the contract. This is the same as it is now. I just wanted to kind of bring up the information again, and just in this context of you won't be able to make those little changes to the budget form. You know, sometimes people will add or change line items, and we're just as a standard across all programs, locking down on that to make sure that those budget adjustments go through the correct process to be reviewed. As I mentioned, for all of this, we'll be creating a cheat sheet that has more detailed step-by-step instructions. We are really hoping this whole process will be easier once you get used to it, more streamlined. And we want to make sure that as we transition, you have the resources you need. So we'll be distributing this cheat sheet before the next reporting deadline. And this webinar will also be available, and we're always available to answer questions. The last report we want to talk about is the annual report. As mentioned previously, what we did is we took some of the questions from the current form, the current Excel form that you guys are doing now, and we took them out and we're asking for them only once a year instead of with each incident. And that report will be completed and submitted in October. So let's walk through this short form. Like I said, it would be submitted annually in October. There are slight wording changes to some of the questions, but these should also look familiar to you. All of the questions on this form are mandatory, so I didn't circle every single one in red, but there's a instruction at the top that says that you'll get an error message if there aren't responses. If there are specific questions that don't apply, you can just enter NA or doesn't apply, and it'll allow you to save and move forward. So the first question is, please provide at least 2 descriptions of incidents you responded to this year and include the following details. So what we did is we kind of looked at incidents, case descriptions that we got through the quarterly reports or in presentations when we did site visits, and tried to standardize some of the pieces to what those case descriptions could include. And these case descriptions are really, really, really helpful in showing the complexity of these cases and all the different things it touches on, how many people are involved, all the secondary cases that come from it. Those kinds of things are harder to capture as just numerical pieces of information. So these case examples are really where you can show all of that and give a better description and story to what you guys are doing. The second question is similar. It's share at least one incident description where you encountered suspected or confirmed trafficking victims on site. And then question 3, share at least one incident description where the illegal marijuana grow had impacts on the environment and or civil code violations. So those are basically the narrative questions that were underneath each section in the Excel form that we just pulled out and made distinct. Question 4 and question 5 have to do with the resources that you used or didn't have available to you. So these really help us understand any unmet resource needs. Please be detailed. Like with question 4, list any additional agency resources that your project needed but did not have access to. And this is related to staff members, specialized positions, overtime funding, things like that. So we use these questions to help us understand the whether or not the allocation for this grant is sufficient to maintain programs to do these important jobs in the community. We are statutorily mandated to include that information in our annual reports. So we want to be as complete in this reporting as possible, so we know if there's things that you're borrowing all the time from somebody else, things that you really could have used on site but didn't have. We want to know that information so it can help us with those estimates and say what is still needed resource-wise for this grant. So question 6 is the same. That deals with equipment, equipment that was needed during the reporting period. And then question 7 is new. And we added this question, how many active investigations do you have underway? Because when we did our site visits, during the last grow season, most teams just had these extensive lists of investigations of properties they were watching, of people that they were surveilling that aren't really captured in this incident-based reporting. And those activities take a lot of time and effort, and we want to get some type of numerical idea of that time and effort. So this was our attempt to do that. Again, if you feel that that's not accurately capturing that, please let us know. But we did want to get some type of number of active investigations so we can kind of get at that information a little bit more. So we have actually made it all the way through all of the forms. I know that was a lot. Like I said, we really value your feedback and questions. If anyone has any feedback or questions right now, please speak up. Not seeing any raised hands and nobody's speaking up. So, again, these reports are to tell your story as best as possible. Oh, we did get a question. Will this new format be on SM Apply? Yes. We're working on testing everything out so it can unroll seamlessly. And once we get that done, we'll be able to share with you how you access them, but it will be on SM Apply. And all of that will be in the cheat sheet as well. So thank you for that question. We are always available if you have additional questions and feedback. I do just want to point out those pictures of my sister's dogs. They're really cute. I guess if there are no other questions or comments, then that concludes the presentation. And so thank you guys very much for tuning in. There'll be more to come, as I said. Please feel free to share this presentation with folks. And we really appreciate you guys, all the work that you do and all the feedback that we've gotten so far on the data reporting. So thank you. All right.